Okay. So, Robert, good to see you again. We've been chatting about several things, including about practice. You were mentioning that some days you feel like a nut and some days you don't.
Yep, yep. The
Okay.
best kind of nut. Sometimes it's a walnut, a great walnut, and
Hmm.
other days it's like a nut in the madhouse.
All right. So, um, basically, you can see that our culture is designed around um, a few make people making a whole lot of money off of the efforts of a whole lot of people. And to do that, we have to keep them working. That in fact, the whole idea of a slave shop or a sweatshop is that the bosses can keep people working and working and working and working, long days, no days off, that in fact, in very, very ancient times or in ancient cultures, is where the whole idea of having a day off occasionally, like once every week, or in fact, the whole idea of a week and 7 days actually comes from the adaptation of the moon cycles. So that some days it's if you're going to keep the week according to the moon, then occasionally a week has to have 8 days, and that when even the Beatles were talking about 8 days a week, I don't think that they were talking about the fact that in Asia the week has to do with the lunar cycle. That in fact, when uh, Thai people or Asian people come to the United States, they immediately adopt from the lunar cycle into the easier to work with 7 days a week. But the point that we're making here is that not every day is the same, and that it is exploitive of our culture on the individual to think that everyone is going to be the same every day and everyone is up and capable of work. Get up out of bed and go to work. You're not sick. Get up and go to school. This is the mentality that we have developed in our society. But the one who is telling you to get up and go to school is the one who is expecting to make benefit out of the fact that he's gotten you to get up and go to school or get up and go cut the grass or whatever it is. And so one of the derogatory words that's often used in our language is that, oh, he's lazy. What actually the word lazy means is that someone is too smart or too wise to be exploited.
Hmm.
That in fact, human existence from very, very early time is very much like animals. The humans have been animals just like animals have been animals, and all, and you except when the human bosses come around, um, animals don't work. Look at your average group of alligators, whether they're in an alligator pond in Africa or in an alligator pond in a zoo. Alligators tend to just hang out,
Yep.
waiting
Yeah,
for an opportunity for a meal.
yeah. I've two things you'll enjoy. So one is a quote from Bill Gates. He said, "If you give me the chance to hire a hardworking person or a lazy person, all other things being equal, he'd hire the lazy one because the lazy one will find the more efficient way of doing something."
Mhm.
And then the other little fact for you is there was a famous psychologist, Robert Sapolsky, and he went out to Africa to study baboons, and he found that the average baboon
You could have
spent
gone to South Carolina to do that. Never mind. I was in South Carolina. I know, but go ahead.
okay, yeah, so he went there, he studied them, and he found The average baboon works, and by work he means like they're hunting, foraging, this and that,
Mm-hmm.
4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the time they spend hanging out,
Hanging out.
having fun, eating, drinking, whatever, and so they work less than we do, and we're the superior civilization, so
That's according to biased opinion.
yes.
All right. Well, if you think about it, way, way, way back when, before human civilization, humans lived just like those baboons. That in fact, in hunting, gathering, it
Yep.
looks like that the kids and the women would go out gathering, and they would gather for about an hour or so, find some nice stuff, take it back to their camp. While the men went out occasionally, the older boys and the men would go out after some kind of big game, and if the game was big enough, they wherever the game was killed, they invited the whole troop to move there. This is what called the original reason for nomadic tribes was not because they went someplace to find food. It's that when they found it, that's where they lived.
Hmm.
And so, like if you got a mastodon, why drag that mastodon anyway? You killed it right here. Let's cut it up and let's eat it right here.
Sure.
Okay, so this is how it happened. And that if they killed a wildebeest or a mastodon or whatever like that, then some of the meat would rot before they ate it. And so they learned to dry food and whatnot like that. Um, to preserve it. Um, but basically, a kill would last for a week. So they'd go out in the morning, they'd kill something, and then they didn't have to work for a week. This is how humans and every one of us in our society can live like that. If we live simple and easy, we could live cheap.
Yep.
People do that, and we can live well. They have the idea that about poverty levels. I think that much of what poverty really is stupidity and greed. And actually,
Mhm.
when we think about stupidity, we can think of it as, in fact, ignorance. And there you go, the second noble truth. Poverty is dukkha only when it's full of greed, ill will, and delusion. But if poverty has no delusion about it and it has no greed about it, then poverty is wonderful.
Sure.
But our society doesn't teach that at all.
No.
It teaches, oh, since you've got so much greed and you've got so much ignorance about it, we can put you to work. And
Sure.
that's how this society is built. And the whole idea is then people are not taught to pay attention to how they feel. They're not taught to look at the cycles that we go through. They're taught, in fact, by the words that I just used. You're not sick, get up and go to school.
Right.
I've heard that more than once.
Right. And they try to condition you for 17 years, and you still don't want to do it. It's just not our nature.
It's not our nature. We actually, the society exploits us to go against our nature. You've probably heard this many times also, and that is that voters vote against their own best interest.
Yep. Every
Mhm.
election
Exactly. Okay,
for
so
every
not
topic.
not only do they vote every 2 or every 4 years against their own best self-interest, they get up out of bed out of their own against their own best self-interest, and they go to work against their own best self-interest, and they
Yep.
behave throughout the day against their own best self-interest. This is basically what we mean by the waking up process. Now I know that they've got a new word in America called woke, and I don't
Yep.
know really what that is, but it probably came about from the concept of Buddha or to awaken. But basically, the word woke in America. I'm not quite figured out what it means yet, but I think that it means just simply not Republican.
Well, it means a little more than that. It means kind of progressive, and it means it's not simply not Republican, it's progressive, and it
Mhm.
also connotes like being really interested in racial justice and these kinds of things, and environmental stuff and all of that. It's kind of like more far left, than it is just center left, generally speaking.
Okay. In a way, you could think of it like this. I've talked to students times talking about the fact that a really, really big ship doesn't have brakes. Even rowboats don't have brakes. Boats don't have brakes, which means you kind of got to watch where you're going so that you can steer. And I think that this whole concept of woke is basically that a few people on that big tanker of society are beginning to wake up to see that this society's ship is heading into dangerous territory, and somebody ought to get up to the helm and change the direction of the ship, and nobody's doing that yet. Nobody's actually
Yeah,
got their hand on the wheel to steer this ship of state out of the dangerous territory that it is heading into right now.
yes,
Uh, so
yeah.
that's
I'm sorry.
but really woke. The awakened one is would have already changed the steering, but in this sense, the woke are only awake to social ills that they're doing nothing about when they don't recognize that those same social ills that they see in all of society are actually within their individual's own mind. If they're not
Yes,
woke to that yet, they're woke to society's ills, but they haven't woken up to the fact that, as Pogo said, the very fact we have seen the enemy and he is us.
yes, yes, and that's actually part of the issue in American politics is many people identify with a political party performatively and culturally. They don't
Hmm.
actually think things through, and you see that on every level of the political spectrum, from as far left as you can possibly get to as far right as you can possibly get. People
Hmm.
identify for reasons that have nothing to do with clarity of thought. Rare people will have some clarity of thought, very rare, but they identify because this is the culture they consume, this is the culture they're a part of. Like, a big, like, woke thing to do in America over the racial justice riots, the George Floyd riots, over the summer, was to replace your social media profile with a black square, you know, which, I mean, it's nice that people are raising awareness to this. It's a good thing. But, if all you're doing is changing your profile picture to a black square and you have no solutions for anything, you don't understand the problems, you're just doing the black square to fit in with everyone else, you know,
Hmm.
that's not real woke, in my opinion, but it's considered woke in quotation marks, right? So,
I understand. That's interesting because if you do
yeah,
not put up a photo or an avatar, then it will have, let us say, a silhouette.
yes.
Yeah, right. And now people are actually not using the silhouette, which would be the wokest thing to do. The wokest thing to do is to do nothing at all. But they're saying woke, it means I've got to go
Yeah,
find some black square someplace and plug that in. Well, that sounds like just a lot of work.
right. So I can look good to all of my friends, like I'm a good person, and that's a big part of the issue with the wokeism today. And I live in a woke capital of the world in New York City. It's very, progressive here in the politics, and it's funny because I'm from Seattle, which is even more progressive than New York. So
Hmm.
as a result, I'm kind of libertarian myself, and kind of just leery in general of progressivism because I've seen it just go way off the rails in Seattle and in much less in New York, but to some degree in New York. But I'll tell you this though, if I was from Carolina or Texas, I'd probably be a progressive. It's just it's just I can see in wherever I am, I often will see the contradictions, you know. Maybe that's
Mm,
part of being Jewish, you know, is you just tend to be an outsider, you know. We're the outsiders, you know.
right. While you were talking about that, I was thinking about the possibility of a new political party. And the name of the political party is the Comedian Party. Why? Because politics is a joke. And
Yeah,
so the Comedian Party would be advertising people don't vote.
sure.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that that just large by the millions and millions of people just don't vote?
They already
But
do.
well, no, I'm talking about those that are voting now
Yeah.
by the hundreds of millions, or that not that's a little grandiose, but by the tens of millions that people just stop voting. So, for instance, in New York State, uh, well, I don't know. Let us say nationwide, this last election, they had a large number of people, 80 million versus 75 million. I imagine they come in now with a new election and it's like 21 million against 19 million. And 100 million people who voted in 2020 just don't vote anymore.
It wouldn't be the powers that be wouldn't be happy about that. But it's funny you say
Yes,
that
but it
because
would get worse. It
yeah,
would get worse, you see. Not only would the people not care and not vote, but a whole lot of politicians recognizing that they were not, even if they got elected into office, would not have any power because nobody cares. But in
yeah,
fact, this is what happens in a benign government. What I'm talking about is the reason so many people voted was because you had a whole lot of people who cared because they had skin in the game, they had money on the line, they had a reason to vote because they didn't like what was going on. The Republicans didn't like the Democrats because they've been taught to be racist and hatred, and the Democrats were completely freaked out about how stupid the Republicans have gotten. And so you had a really, really huge election, right? Okay. Just the opposite of that. Imagine that most of the people don't care anymore. In that regard, that would mean that the government itself was kind of getting benign. It wasn't, people don't care anymore, which means now the government is doing pretty good. This is exactly what happens with politics in Thailand, is that people go for years and years and years, and there's no issue and there's no trouble or whatever like that. And one little thing comes up, and all of a sudden the whole crowd goes, woof, and they solve the problem, and then they go back to sleep. So this is really what politics should be like. But in American politics, it is one disaster after another with every election.
well,
And
it's
because
fun.
of that,
Yeah,
you have a whole lot of people voting one election after another, because the problems that they voted for never got fixed. If so, you can say that possibly if Biden does a really good job of pacifying the crowds, then nobody will vote, and the Republicans will rush right back in because they're the
yeah,
ones who are
yeah.
unhappy. It's always the unhappy ones that put in the most effort to
Well,
get
yeah, you
something
saw
done.
that this election and last election in both
Hmm.
cases. But two comments. One is the comedian party. It's funny you mentioned that because there's a very famous comedian in England, Russell Brand. You probably, I
Yes,
don't
I
know if
know
you've heard
him.
of him. And he actually, in one of the elections, I don't remember how long ago this was, maybe like 5 years ago or something, he was telling everyone not to vote. So he
Hmm.
was a comedian doing exactly what you were saying. So I thought that was kind of funny. But the other thing I was going to say was there was a Democrat running. I think his name was Tim Ryan or something like that. He was like single digits, you know, didn't go anywhere. But one thing he said that was great is that he was running for president because he didn't want anyone to have to think about who the president was anymore.
Hmm. Okay.
That, that's a great thing. I think, that's the way it should be. And as someone that, believes in, localism, I think power
Hmm.
should be devolved to localities as much as possible, taken away from government bureaucracy, centralized in localities. That's what I
Well, a
believe.
really, really brilliant society would take power away from anybody who tries to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and Gandhi was an anarchist, and he believed in anarchism, ultimately for India. That was his ultimate vision. I don't think we could, as a
That's what
society,
I just
function
was
at that
talking
level yet.
about. That was the direction that I was going. When
Yep.
people stop voting, what that means is ultimately those people who used to vote and now don't vote anymore are kind of okay with whatever the government does. So if the government is in fact benign, or if the government is actually doing something good, wholesome, valuable, and useful, then the people don't have to do anything anymore. This is what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talked about in his book on Dhammic socialism. And the problem would be the use of the terms about whatever form of government, and whatever term we use, somebody's going to get really, really uptight about it. But in the sense of Marxism, or a dictator, a despot, a king, or even an elected president like Putin. But in any case, it doesn't matter what form of government, or what the guy is called. The point is that if it's a benign dictatorship, or a benign Marxist government, or a benign socialist government, or benign democracy, then that's the right way to go. Unfortunately, democracies are designed to be not benign. A democracy is designed to be in conflict, that you've got two people in, or two groups of people or in India, 14 groups of people that are all vying to try to gain power, to take power from each other so that they can get it. Now, if you have a really benign form of government, that means that the people are satisfied with the government, and then the people are not going to be political very much. And so, in a country like the United States, with the mass media that they have, the American media will look at other countries that have a benign form of government, and every little thing that goes wrong with it, they'll blow it up to be as big as the problems in the United States, to where there's really not that much going on. Uh, but unfortunately, there have been very few benign governments in the history of the world. Almost always a dictator is dictatorial rather than benign. Almost always a despot is despotic. Always a king will try to take power, usurp power from people. And so the question is, how can we have a form of government that is, in fact, uh, for the people in general, or the entire government, the entire population of the people would be satisfied with the government? Then voting wouldn't be much of an issue anymore. If we all, let us say, if we had a choice between two really, really excellent politicians to vote for, the population would go, the voting population would go down, because people don't care. In other words, politician A and politician B from different parties, both of them would make really, really an excellent president. Then that particular election, nobody's going to vote. The reason that there was record turnout in this last election is because of the level of unhappiness and excitement that
Right.
was there. So this is why I would like to see, and other people say, "Oh, that would be a tragedy." Oh no, if very few people voted, that's a very good sign.
It's funny. A couple comments on that. One is, I can think of a benign government that's kind of a one-party state, but is still a democracy, and that's Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Japanese government is quite benign. They don't really intrude in their citizens' lives too much. The culture does. The culture can be oppressive in Japan, but the government does not. The government is
Mm-hmm.
quite benign, and it's basically been one party there that's run the state for, a very long time. You
Since
know,
the 80s. Not very
yeah,
well, but
and
it depends.
yeah,
No,
but
that actually,
benign.
you're right. You're right. Exactly. Um, the statement that I just made, not very well, is in fact Wall Street and the New York Times view of Japan. That's America's view of Japan. Is they never the problems they had, the financial problems they had in the 1980s, they never got over it. They never got over it. Japan, do you remember back in the day? Maybe you were really, really kid then, but uh, industry was very much afraid of Japan. When Japanese cars came on, before it was Japanese
Yeah,
cars, it was
I,
Japanese toys for kids.
I don't remember it, but I've read all about it. I know people were afraid, but the thing is, like Japan, their economy kind of stopped growing, but it's still very nice to be Japanese today.
Hmm.
Like the economy is good enough.
So it's great for the
The society, it's
Japanese,
very
but it's a
safe.
terrible silk culture for Wall Street Journal crowd.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Americans think that
yeah.
things have gone hell in the handbasket because the gross national product of Japan has stymied to where, in fact, the Japanese people are doing quite well, thank you,
They
to
are,
where
yeah,
the
they just
money.
don't need to grow. Yeah. And capitalism, they want growth all the time. So from that perspective, it's not. But from the perspective of a Japanese person, it's fine. And if you were born there today, you would be luckier than many, many other people. And
Mm-hmm.
and another example of a government that is kind of in the middle, they're I wouldn't say they're fully benign, but I would not say that they're horrible either, is Singapore. Singapore is another country where it would be good to be born in today. You would be lucky to be born there. But, there's certain things that you can't do, like chewing gum, for example, or,
I can't chew
opposing.
gum, and I'm in Thailand.
Yeah, they don't have gum there.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
uh, I would not even say that even 7-Eleven has chewing gum. It just
really,
never.
never
Okay.
took off.
And
Huh.
and in Singapore, it became kind of a fad that the Asian people didn't. I guess the chewing gum was kind of an American fad that was done by advertisements and whatnot. And so some advertisements went into Singapore, and then it was all, it just all of a sudden all this chewing gum was everywhere.
I was
And
reading
so
about.
they banned it.
Yeah.
They banned it, and the Singapore people had no problem with that at all. But the
Huh.
American people, hearing that chewing gum was banned in Singapore, and that put a big black cross right across Singapore. Oh, that's a terrible place because, and that was what, 50 years ago or something. That happened back in the 1970s and early 80s.
Uh, I, I was reading about Lee Kuan Yew today, who I consider a really interesting person, and I was reading an obituary about him in the New York Times, and they were talking about how they quoted some Singaporean that said, because he liked to terrorize his political opponents with lawsuits. I don't know how much you know about Lee Kuan Yew, probably a lot because you live in that region, but if you wanted to run against him, his party, he would just hit you with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Then you'd be broke, So he had that tyrannical side to him. And one person in the article said, and I don't know if this person was speaking for the public or whatever, but I think he or she said that there that often there was kind of a climate of fear in Singapore. But I don't know if that's BS or not. But that was what this one person said in the article, that you felt you could not oppose the government at all, and that created kind of a climate of fear. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that was what I read in the article.
Um, I would say it has to do with which economic class that people are in. The Singapore police, for instance, do not molest the general population the way that the police in the United States habitually harass people on a regular basis. I think part of that has to do with geography, but it also has to do with more of a mental attitude about it. You see that cops in the United States have been revenuers all along, in the sense that the cops have to support themselves. If they cannot get enough people to to pay fines, and in many places, in fact, there's a number of towns throughout, depending upon traffic, road conditions, and whatnot like that. And there's, they've been published on a regular basis. Stafford, South Carolina, has is a little town that's on a highway between two fairly large towns, and it's also a road that goes into North Carolina and whatnot like that. And the Stafford police have been known to, if you go through Stafford, you're going to get stopped. And they have a local law saying that if you pay the fine this way, then that town will not notify anyone that they stopped you. In other words, it's not going to affect your insurance. It's not going to affect your points if the state has points on your license or whatever like that. And that's how this town makes their living. There's also one that's well known in a small town that's on I-40, coming out of the Ozarks. There's a very, very long stretch of downhill. And so people normally just let it rip.
Mm.
And there at the bottom, around the bend, are 4 or 5 cop cars catching everything that comes down that highway. My dad was driving at that particular time when we were traveling, but we got stopped in that one. But many, many small towns. But then you look at your average city. I mean, much of the reason why Ferguson had the trouble that they were having was because Ferguson cops made money by stopping people. That was what the whole police system was. In Singapore, they don't have that kind of thing. So when people, they say in Singapore, are afraid of the government, that does not mean that they're afraid of the local police and the local governments. And well, Singapore is just a city island anyway. What they're talking about is in high politics. If you want to run for office, you better be afraid of these other guys in office. That's the kind of issue it is. But as far as the people who were out on the street, nobody gives a flying rip about the local cops. Now,
Well,
the
that's
Thai
good.
people are afraid of the cops only if the cops get involved. But here in Thailand, it's kind of a cultural thing to where the cops they do not have sting operations. Now, they do have some. One of the, this is an interesting thing, that when the cops do set up a roadblock, they don't set it up to do the most uh, business. They will merely set up the roadblock in front of the police station. That's where they'll set them up.
Mm.
Okay, right in front of the police station. And if you drive in front of the police station, then they may ask you for whatever reason that they're stopping you. Now, one of the things that they find in Thailand is that the community will also set up a roadblock on either side of the police roadblocks, and that there will be partying, there will be a tent, some of the city elders and whatnot like that. And what they're trying to do is to prevent the drunks on the road from getting in front of the police station.
Mm.
Now, when do they do this? They do it on holidays. is on the
It's
holidays when
nice,
the
yeah.
yeah, when people are out drinking. So the local people have this. I've seen them on this island. I've seen them in Udon Thani. I have seen them in Bangkok. I've seen them in several places to where the actual local people will set up roadblocks to prevent people in the community from getting stopped by the police.
Hmm, interesting.
And then that's the kind of cooperation that the Thai people have. To where in America the police system is completely different, because the police in America have always been part of the revenue stream.
Hmm.
To where the
So,
Thai police, the actual function that they have, they normally sit inside their police station and wait for someone to have a complaint. When there is actually complaints between two people in Thailand, one of them will call the police, and the police will come and investigate and find out what's going on. But other than that, the police are not actually out doing sting operations. So where in the West, 90% of all police activities has to do with sting operations. You know what I mean by a
sure.
sting,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right,
So,
hiding behind a sign or behind a billboard or behind a tree with their radar uh, speed detectors out or whatever like that, trying to catch people speeding.
well, it's
Thai
funny.
Thai
Yeah.
cops know how to catch people speeding when they have an accident. There they are. And so, if a
Well, yeah.
traffic accident happens, then the police are called, and the situation is taken care of that way.
Okay, I got a story for you you'll really like. So, I was reading in The Economist about Japan's crime rate, and it got so low that the police had to start inventing completely ridiculous stings to be able to catch anyone doing anything. So, for example, they parked a car off the side of the road on the highway, and they put several big stacks of beer inside the car and then opened the door so everyone could see, and then hid behind a hill and waited for several days. And it wasn't till about 5 days passed that finally someone stopped to get a beer and they arrested him. And then the judge threw it out, you know? So that was a fun story. And the other one is they actually, so the crime is so low that there was a concert in Japan, I think in Tokyo or whatnot, like a rock concert, this kind of thing.
Mhm.
And someone was smoking pot, and someone called the cops. They sent 20 police officers for one guy smoking pot at a concert. 20, you know, because they just had
And I
nothing
bet they
better to
didn't
do.
even hurt him. And I bet they didn't even hurt
They
him.
probably didn't, no. But yeah, so it's ridiculous. But I have two questions about this, so or 2 to 3 questions about this. So one is, you know, it seems to me that what causes government, whether it's democratic, like Japan, although Japan's doing quite well, or it's more authoritarian, like say the Chinese government, which is quite brutal, um, what
That's
what
our that is our estimation of it based upon the Western press. It's just different. That I've actually got students who live in China,
Sure.
and I talk to them about that from time to time. And Kopi says that he hardly ever sees a cop.
Hmm. Now
And he
I
lives
have a
in one of the
friend.
cities in China. So the Chinese people, they don't have much influence with the police. The people there know that the Chinese government had done a lot of construction. There's what 20 or so complete cities that have almost no population. And so the government stopped doing that. In fact, you could say that because of the concrete manufacturing, which takes a lot of energy, plus the transportation and building those big cities, is what was the big oil boom that was lasting for as long as it did. And now, since the past 5 or 10 years, when the Chinese have no longer been building those cities, the amount of oil that's being consumed to manufacture the concrete and build those cities has changed the world's production of oil. And the oil industry did not keep up with that. And so there's still way too much oil production because China's not doing it the way that they used to do it. Yeah, they still have some coal-fired uh, power plants, but they're working really hard to get out of that. I mean, you might have known that at one time back in the 1970s, LA was smog. They called it smog, which was both fog and the sulfur and all of the stuff, lead that was coming out of the tailpipes of cars. And California had to do something about it, though the federal government wasn't about to. And so this is what gave California the automobile emission standards systems that they set up to clean out the air by taking the lead and whatnot out of automobiles to be sold in California. Okay, the reason I'm mentioning that is because that's exactly what's happening in China that the Westerners don't understand. And that is that the people of China, especially in big cities like Beijing, are being strongly affected by the pollution in the air. And they have to do something about this. That's why the Chinese government is going so strong into electric vehicles as well as so much of the other stuff, is because they've got to do something about it.
Sure,
United States hasn't come to the point that they've got to do something about it yet. They're still too busy screaming at each other about how bad your politics are, and they're not about to do anything about it. In fact, the Republican Party seems to be absolutely dead set against doing anything to make improvements for anyone. Absolutely dead set against doing anything that's going to help anyone because the Democrats will get credit for it. Because
Yeah,
the
I mean,
Democrats are the ones who want to do good stuff. But the whole point is that in China they don't have to deal with that. They're working really hard, just like California did, to change their emission standards with the automobiles in California. They also have that with issues not only of the pollution from coal-fired power plants and things like this, and as well as automobiles. They also has issues of desert. The deserts are too close, and so China is working and has been for years to replant some of those deserts and have done remarkably well at it. So China, it looks like, is going exactly in the right direction in all cases, to where the United States is going exactly in the wrong direction in almost every issue.
so a couple of comments on that. One is that, you know, a couple of things. So one is I also have friends from China or in China currently.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
Now in
I have
Hong Kong,
one,
they'll see the police, but in way out in the big cities out in the nation. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
no worries. So one of my friends, who is quite well placed and also very well educated, in China, and you know, he remarked that it feels pretty scary there right now. Is what I've heard from him. Is that
What city does
there's
he
a
live
lot.
in?
Just to protect his privacy, I'd rather not say, but it's on the coast. I'll just put it that way. The
Okay,
eastern.
right.
So so anyway, um, and he said it feels very nationalistic, very warlike, and like Xi Jinping is really rallying a lot of militarism. And
Mm-hmm.
he thinks, well, actually, I've not heard this um, from him, but he would, you know, he's intimated to me that he could see militaristic action being taken in that region sometime soon. Um, so there's this whole, and
You're right.
Xi
They do
Jinping,
have some trouble. They've got
yep,
real problems with Hong
and
Kong and real
and
problems with Taiwan.
Xinjiang too. You know, the
Mm.
1 million Muslims in concentration camps, and they also have Xi Jinping removing term limits, because they had this really smart system after Mao where they would have 2 terms per president, and it was a nice system. They would choose the next one. It was all in the mold of Deng Xiaoping, right, where he was a very, you know, liberal sort of a Chinese politician, right? Where he was opening up a lot of aspects of Chinese society in ways that were beneficial. And
Hmm.
then Xi Jinping came in and completely took it in the opposite direction of more authoritarianism, more monitoring of what everyone's doing, more surveillance, more tracking. You have to use VPNs to do almost anything over there. You know, lots of this kind of thing, as well as stirring up nationalist sentiment and militarism and all of these things, and then removing term limits so he can be president for life.
Hmm.
So he's very, very dangerous. Probably the most dangerous person in the world. And
There's one way of looking at that we might both be missing that would be useful, and that is that people in China are of a wide variety. You could ask in the United States someone a question, and he would come up with how dangerous the United States government is, blah, 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 blah. And you go talk to somebody else, and he says, I don't care. And so this may also be about the issues because the guys that I'm talking to are Dhamma dudes. And
sure,
so, and the guy that you may be talking to may have gotten arrested this year. And so he's going
he
to sue.
didn't, but he definitely didn't. But
He might have.
but who knows? I guess, right? At least
Yeah,
I
so it
wouldn't think
depends
it, but
upon,
yeah.
and so in a way, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I mean, there is so many people and so much happening and so many interactions that it's really hard to get a handle on what's really going on over there.
It is, and there's so much manipulation of everything on
Hmm.
their side.
The
They
news is
manipulate a lot.
manipulated.
We
Everything is
manipulate.
being manipulated. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot of manipulation. I mean, there was one thing that was really concerning as an American, which was we had did you hear about the Daryl Morey? I don't know what the guy's name is, the general manager of the Houston Rockets in Hong Kong. Did you hear about this? So there's
No,
this very
the
famous
Houston Rockets in Hong Kong.
no, okay, so it's about Hong Kong. So
Okay,
there's the general manager of the Houston Rockets, and his name's Maury is his last. I don't know what his first name is, and I don't care about basketball at all. It doesn't interest me. But anyway,
basketball. I was wondering whether it was Twiddlywinks or checkers.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
basketball.
basketball. Glad to hear you don't care either. But but anyway, he did this tweet in support of the protesters in Hong Kong. It was a very mild tweet. It was like I stand with Hong Kong, something like that.
Hmm.
And the the Chinese government responded by completely canceling everything Houston Rockets in China, completely like banning, like they just really just went to town hammering all of their business in China, and basically the whole NBA reacted by removing any statements in support of Hong Kong. LeBron James came out saying like I support the Chinese Communist Party. All these people came out to make sure, because China is a cash cow for the NBA. They make a lot of
Oh,
money off the Chinese market. So they
I
basically,
I was wondering why that would be. If they're not making any money about it, they would have
oh, they're
been.
making so much money. Yeah, they're making a lot. It's their second biggest market. I think actually, maybe for some teams, it is the biggest, but it's a
Well,
huge
that just
market for them.
shows that the American mentality has more to do than with it. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. Never mind about any other
Yeah,
issues.
well, then
It's
what's
always all
hilarious
about
about
the
this is these same basketball players and general managers and whatnot will criticize the American government and police and all of this very harshly, Black Lives Matter, all of this. Then, but they won't say one iota about China after this issue with the Mori. Not a single thing. And there was a huge uproar in recently over what they're doing in Xinjiang, which is a crime against humanity. And not one word, from any of these basketball players. They're collecting huge checks, but they will very happily criticize what the Americans, anything that goes wrong in America. Yet there's 1 million Muslims in concentration camps in China, and they say nothing. So and they're aware of it too, obviously. So
Well, you and I don't know exactly how many there are and what is the definition of concentration camp and all of that kind of stuff. That in fact things may not be nearly as bad as the Westerners say, and the Chinese government is ticked off about the fact that the West is just interfering in so much business in China. So there's always two sides of the issue there.
there is, yeah, but
But the thing that I find really interesting on that same topic in a slightly different way, and that is Charlie Hebdo and uh, let us say cartoon characters with turbans. Cartoon characters with turbans seems to upset Muslims. It would seem to me that because of that, that people would in fact have cartoon pictures of people with turbans, bombs in their turbans, as icons, avatars, pictures, and there would be hundreds of billions of these photos all over the place. They would be sent on a regular basis, that anytime that you have a Muslim friend, you would automatically attach an email photo of a cartoon character with a turban that had a bomb in it. And you just, every time that you send an email, you send that out. If they flooded the world with all of these images, then nobody would care anymore. It's only important because they can control it. You see what I mean? Is only that that there are no pictures of cartoon characters with bombs in their turbans is because somebody didn't like it enough that they caused, you know, some of the stuff that's happened that's killed people, especially in France and in Europe. So they've kind of like let them get away with it, just like the basketball industry has let China get away with saying things about the Uyghurs in Hong Kong. So it's free speech then in that regard is not so free, is it? It depends upon the repercussions.
yeah,
And
there is
when
some cost there, and like that's partly what's very kind of crazy about it as an American is to have a foreign government censoring our own media, just feels very wrong, which I'm sure you can understand, and that's not to say that the American
since
government
I
doesn't.
don't pay attention to either one of them, I can say that it's not my business. When we're getting back to the Dhamma, we can say that, hey, it doesn't matter how much those two groups of people are in conflict with each other. You still don't have to join that conflict, take sides, because if you do, then you're inviting bad feelings. Possibly the strangest example of that would be that on a couple of the videos, I think two different videos that have done with Guru Viking, because those videos have a lot of comments. One of them's got more than 90 comments on it. And someone in there said, how dare you be happy when there are starving kids in Yemen? I think she mentioned Yemen in particular.
Well, how dare anyone be happy?
Right, exactly. And that she got a whole lot of comments back, but she was quite adamant with her position that no one has a right to be happy when anyone else is unhappy, without recognizing that people do have the right to be unhappy. All right. If people
Yep.
got a right to be unhappy, is who to me to change that? And so the point though is that this person, I think it was a woman, uh, is not in Yemen doing anything herself about the starving kids or the problems in Yemen. She's not there. She's sitting at
Right.
her desk at home in America, and she's complaining, why should someone in Thailand be joyful when someone in Yemen is suffering?
Sure.
This,
I mean, it's very like Mahayana as well, or Mahayana. I don't know. Is it, do you
uh-huh.
say Mahayana or Mahayana? Is that what's the proper
I
Mahayana?
don't
Okay,
know
doesn't
any.
matter.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Right. Okay. There's
So
Tibetan and there's Japanese and there's Chan and there's Sun.
sure, sure. So it's
Mahayana, I
Mahayana.
don't know. I think that that's a word that was invented in the West.
I don't know who invented it, but I think the Tibetans actually invented it, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway,
Mm.
because I think it is, I don't know what the language is, but anyway, um, they call it the greater vehicle, right? And the Hinayana is the smaller vehicle. That's why it's considered a diminutive, right? And that's why the they call Hinayana Theravada is not diminutive, right? But anyway, all that aside,
Actually, I know specifically Thai and Lao and Cambodian monks in the United States who just use the word Hinayana as if it doesn't have that connotation. It's the Western mentality that sees the lesser vehicle as lesser
sure.
as opposed
And
to
in
smaller.
fact, you could call it better because, you strip off all the crap, right? It should probably be your opinion. But,
Yeah, dump a big
but,
load off of my boat, right? Including all of
right.
those Republicans. Get out.
So, so anyway, back to the Mahayana. So,
Mhm.
with respect to that, it's an emphasis on the Bodhisattva path. That's what's considered to be the difference between Mahayana and Theravada, right? Is the emphasis on the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva
Mhm.
path as being superior to the Arhat path, is basically what the Mahayanists claim in all their various different
I
forms.
have heard some Mahayanas say that. They're normally beginners, low class, uneducated, Pudajana, ordinary people who say that kind of thing, that what we have is better than yours. The actual bodhisattvas and the actual arahats, they don't talk
They
about that
don't
kind
care.
of crap. They don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah, they don't care. But the reason I brought it up is because this woman in the comments is taking kind of a bodhisattva sort of an approach, right? Because
No,
the
she's absolutely 100% Christian.
sure, but I'm just talking about like in the abstract. Like an actual bodhisattva wouldn't say what she said, but what I mean by that is, according to Bodhisattva, they're supposed to keep being reborn, right, until everyone else is a Bodhisattva. Then they can finally become, an Arhat, right? Or they can finally become a Buddha, you
Right.
know.
A vow of failure. Yes, I got that.
Yes, yes, and that's basically what she's making is a vow of failure,
Hmm. And
and
she's
that was
failing.
that was the
And
connection I
and
was
she's
making.
failing in this
Yep.
moment. She's not failing after 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 rebirths. She's failing right now. Oh, she's miserable right now.
Right, and the
And she's
Bodhisattva.
not actually um fulfilling her, if you would think of it like that, if she had one, she's not fulfilling her bodhisattva vow. She's not at all doing anything Buddhist. This is 100% Christian. This is all suffer all the time. How dare
Right.
you be happy? We've got trouble here. We got
Well, a
trouble in
couple
River City.
Yes, and a couple of comments on that. One is what she's really saying in her comment is, why can't I be happy?
Yeah,
That's really what she's saying. Why can't
yeah,
I be
I
happy?
got that. Exactly.
Yes. Why am I not happy? Oh, it's this kid in Yemen. This
It's the
kid is
kid
the
in Yemen.
reason.
And guess what? The kid in Yemen is not in Yemen. The kid in Yemen is in her mind.
Right, right. Yemen might not even exist. I mean, Yemen probably exists, but you know what I mean. She's never been there. Never seen it.
Right.
Where's Yemen, right?
At best,
Um,
it's a picture on a map.
sure. So then my other comment that I was gonna make was God, oh well, I kind of forgot, but that's okay. Um, let's see,
Well, let's
Yemen.
go back to that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that Mahayana um, Bodhisattva.
I remember now.
Okay.
Just briefly. Um, so what this kind of connects to my practice. So, one thing I noticed today. So a couple things. So one was that after I had done a certain amount of sits today, and I was at the point where I was just walking through my day and just plucking joy, from the ether, just I'd notice something and then I'd return to it's all good, it's all fine, whatever. Just continually gladdening the mind as I was walking through. And you talked about this in one of the videos that you mentioned, is I became aware that and this is your video on Dark Night of the Soul, was I became aware how much of how much of my life has been spent in this kind of fog of this fog of dukkha, fog of just
Hmm.
not feeling good and running from a monkey mind, swinging from one rotten branch to the next, you know, like that woman in the comment, although maybe not quite like that, but, in my own way, you know. And so I was like, wow, that's it's a lot of time that's been spent there, even just this morning, when I woke up before I had my first sit, and
Hmm.
yesterday when I was having my day off day, you know, um, which we started to discuss at the beginning of this about how it's okay to take a day off, kind of, kind of a thing. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every day is a different day. And the right way to approach it is through investigation. How is today? What do I feel like? If I feel tired, let me take a few deep breaths. Let's see if we can do something with that. If the mind tends to get off on a particular topic, which could be anything, a return to eBay, a visa that's got to be signed, anything that is work to be done that we haven't done yet. Maybe it's not the time to do it, but the mind will spin about getting that thing done over and over and over again. And that would be the kind of thoughts that you would have on a down day, you would say, where our sati is not so good. That sati goes up and down, sati is affected just
mm,
like everything else. That when the
mm,
mind is sharp, then the sati is good. This is, in fact, why it's not a good idea for people to practice sitting for a long, long time, is because when they're sitting a long time, the mind gets dull, their sati gets dull, and they go off into a really dull state. And then their delusional thinking is, this is meditation. I'm going deep. No, they're not going deep. They're just going dull.
mm,
And so this is something that we can begin to look at, is that let's uh, practice in a way that's going to keep the mind sharp, as opposed to practicing in a way that intentionally or almost semi-intentionally gets it to be dull again. That's an example then of that bodhisattva ideal that we were talking about. Getting back to that, is the people don't realize that that actually is taking the vow of failure. Why? Because everybody knows that the world is full of all kinds of people, and by the time that all of those people have been cured of their ills, the next generation will have all of their ills, and this poor dumb bodhisattva that's taken this vow has no chance of coming out of his suffering unless he works really hard and suffers a whole lot to get all of these other people out of their suffering, and they don't want to come out of their suffering.
Right.
Okay. Now, so the problem is not the bodhisattva ideal. The problem is the vow,
Hmm.
because the vow sets one up for failure, in the sense that even the Buddha says that renunciation is an ordinary right view act. Why?
Hmm.
Because renunciation always winds up in ripens in clinging, in the sense that when you renounce something, say, I'm not ever going to do that again, then how bad are you going to feel when you do it again?
Sure.
Right? Okay. So if you instead have, instead of the vow, I will never do that again, we can say, wow, that hurts. That's painful. I'm going to remember this so that the next time it happens, I'll be on top of it.
Hmm.
And then the next time, and I miss that one too, then I can go back and do the same thing again. Wow, it hurts again. Let me keep my eye open so that I can see what's going on. And that one then winds up being successful,
So
to
what if
where
you think that?
renunciation brings on failure.
Sure. So let's say I'm having a bad day, right? Or I'm having an off day. Let's not even call it bad. Just call it an off day. You know, and I say, "Oh, this is bad. Next time I'm going to try better." That doesn't sound so wholesome. Like, wouldn't it be more wholesome just to say, "Oh, it's just an off day. That's fine." You know,
Hmm.
wouldn't that be more wholesome?
Well, yes, in the sense that look at what's going on and let's evaluate what's happening right now, and do
Right.
so without judgments. It's always nurturing. Oh, yes, I see that today I feel low. Today I'm sick. Today I'm have sore muscles. Today I have indigestion, or today I have sticky bowels, or something. Okay. The point is to know what the body is doing without making judgments about it, but rather to just experience what the body is doing so that we begin to get to know the body very well. So, in that regard, we don't have to judge. You can say that there are many different ways to describe it, and you can use the same words and be non judgmental, and then use those same words and be judgmental. Like, for instance, a bad day or an off day. That off day can just be informational, but we can say it as an off day in the sense of, and I really don't like it. I really don't like how I feel right now, right? That's dukkha, not liking how you feel rather than just experiencing how you feel.
Sure.
Okay,
So
so let's get
yeah.
back a little bit then to the this renunciation or this bodhisattva vow, and look at it from the perspective of um, with the Dhamma. And this is not necessarily Theravada that we're saying, but when we have the Dhamma, then we can see the enormous benefit of it. And because of this enormous benefit, we actually want to share it with others. Now, we can do that in a real way, or we can do that in a grandiose way. So, in the grandiosity, we can see that even in the Theravada practice of metta, may all beings be happy. is exactly that same thing that the Bodhisattvas are doing. May all beings be free from suffering, and then I will be free from suffering. At least in the metta, they say, may all beings be happy, without having that kicker of it. Only when they do, I can be happy. But it's still the same thing. To whereas we never practice that way, it's not possible. And so when we have may all beings be happy, or may all beings with the Bodhisattva, that's let us say it's an abstract concept that we have no clue about. What do you mean by all beings? And then I think of one worm and one elephant and one zebra and one human and one barfly and one gadfly, and that's my whole all beings, right? The human mind is not capable of surrounding and getting a hold of a concept of all beings. It's abstract completely, right? You can example of that is that you can think of one marching band, but you cannot think of all marching bands.
Sure.
So the right way of practicing both the Bodhisattva and the Metta is to do it in a real way. In other words, in Metta, when you have the Dhamma, when you have the joy, then you want to share that joy. And you can share it in the sense of you've heard teach a man to fish versus giving him a fish. If you give him a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, then he can eat not only for his lifetime, but he can feed others also. You probably heard that. Okay. So you can give the Dhamma like you give a fish just by smiling at people.
Mm.
That's just sharing the Dhamma. You've got joy, share it. Be happy. You know, encourage others to be happy in this present moment. Not all beings, just the people who can see your joy, because in that particular moment, that's your whole world.
Yep.
Your whole world is what you can see, feel, touch, taste, and experience. And when you can't touch, taste, feel, or experience it, then it's only a concept. It's not real. So in that way, the kids in Yemen who were starving in Yemen is still merely a concept. It's not real kids. But if I had a kid from Yemen, with or without a passport, who shows up on my doorstep or here on the porch, I'm going to treat him very well. But if he stays in Yemen and I'm not in Yemen, there's not much I can do about it. And yet, this is where these vows come from. May all beings be happy, or may all beings be free from suffering with the Bodhisattva ideal. Those ideals are bound for failure because one individual person does not have that kind of profound influence on people. For instance, at best, at the time of the death of the Buddha, there was approximately 20,000 bhikkhus, of which approximately 10% of them were arahats at that time. And you can say, wow, that was really successful. It's especially successful because that group has maintained its existence for 2,500 years. Not only that, but all across the world, the Bhikkhu Sangha, or the order of monks, nuns, whatever, in various countries and various robes and whatnot like that, is well over 6 million.
Mm.
Well, probably there's not 6 million armed troops in the world right now, anywhere. Worldwide, there are more Buddhist monks and nuns and devotees and shaved heads and white dressed folks than there are in military uniform. And I think that that's quite marvelous. However, however, at the time of the Buddha, when he died, there was only 20,000 out of a population of maybe 500,000 in that whole area of India. So, in that regard of the Bodhisattva ideal, the Buddha was a raucous failure. All beings be happy? Sorry, he failed at that.
Sure.
It's too grandiose. But did he actually have a major influence on every person he met? Absolutely.
Sure. I read this book a while back, about a year and a half ago, about the Bodhisattva path, in part. And that was a big part of it, not the whole subject of the book, but it was a big part of it. And the author made the point. The author was a Zen guy, which is interesting because Zenists don't really write about Bodhisattva that much, but he did. And
Such
he
is the
made the
nature of Western Buddhism.
yeah, yeah, sure.
It's a
Um,
stew. It's worse than a stew.
sure, but anywho, it was a nice book. It was about creativity in Buddhism, but anyway, maybe he was being creative too. But anyway, he made the point that what is so wonderful about the Bodhisattva path is exactly the fact that it's so unrealistic. And that's what's so beautiful about it.
Wow, that is so Western.
And
That
then
is
the other thing that he said was
what is
that
wonderful about something is that it's impossible. What?
yeah, no, yeah, he said it's so optimistic. It's the most optimistic viewpoint you could possibly have, to have everyone be a bodhisattva. He said it's so optimistic that should inspire you. How optimistic that is. So that was kind of an interesting
Yes, it
perspective.
does.
Yeah,
It is a bait and switch, and he is predominating the bait. It is delicious. It is marvelous. It is a wonderful idea on paper until you try to put it in action, and then you can see it is a impossible situation. It's too grandiose. It's too much, and it is guaranteed to fail.
and
Hmm?
discourage ultimately, be a source of discouragement.
Right,
It's
and
kind of
so
like
people
a
wind up
kid.
being discouraged with it. You're right with that. Okay, so a much better way of looking at it is that instead of saying, "Oh, I have to wait until all of the other people get the Dhamma before I can get the Dhamma. Therefore, I am now in a state of deprivation, and I've got to go work to help all of those people in order to get my reward." How is that different from Western society going to work for the man? I work for the man, I help the man, I get my boss's business going, and he'll give me a crumb or two. That's the
Somewhat
Bodhisattva
similar.
ideal. It is.
Somewhat.
It really
I
is.
mean,
Okay.
the
As
difference
opposed
is you'd
to,
still be pretty happy if you're a bodhisattva. You wouldn't be quite as happy as if you were an arhat or a Buddha, but you'd still be quite good. You'd be much better than the average person. If you're a bodhisattva, you're like
the
90% instead of
word
100%.
actually means, what it actually means is seeker, or one who is looking. Now, if you put that as a distinction between he who is searching, looking, and he who is finding and enjoying, you will see he who is finding and enjoying successful, and he who is seeking and not finding as failing. The Bodhisattva ideal is a failure, because,
Sure,
but
but
if they have it is that you have to have all beings be happy before you can be happy, which is the way that people hear that. So much better way of doing it is get your own happiness, and then you can spread it at whatever limited way that you can spread it.
right,
If you
right.
spread joy, then spread joy. If you have room on your boat for someone, then take them on as a student, teach them how to make a boat, teach them how to row a boat, and let them go do that too. And pretty soon we have all of the people in the boats who want to be in boats. And
And none
all
of
of
them
those people
exist.
who, hmm?
And none of them exist.
Well, it depends upon how the metaphor is used.
No, just none of them exist in general.
What do you mean?
No one exists.
Depends upon how you define the word one.
No person exists. No,
Okay, it depends upon how that you define the word person.
no, no innate individual with a particular identifier exists. You have aggregates of
Nothing
body and
permanent
mind.
exists. Nothing permanent exists. There is no
Yes,
essence of Robert.
right. You have aggregates. There's the five aggregates, right?
And
It's
everybody's got them, and they do with them what they want to do.
They
Well,
don't. They
not what
just
they want
do.
to do. They do it the way they were told to do it.
The
Right.
things
Okay.
themselves just do.
Okay.
They don't do it. You
Right.
don't do it. I don't
So
do
a
it.
lot of
The
that's
things just
that's
do.
well, the point that I'm making here is that language has a lot to do then with our concepts. That it's confusing. But that confusion can be easily, let us say, the Gordian knot can be easily split in one's mind when we talk about it in the sense of permanency, that everything is temporary. There is no self in the sense that the self is something that is definitive, long lasting, and actually does exist. And the example would be the chariot that the King Melinda has. Okay, that chariot does exist only in the mind of the guy who knows about chariots. But the chariotness is not in the chariot because you can take the chariot apart and the wheels are over here, and the rims are over there, and the basket's over there, the straw out
Yep.
of the basket's over there, and the center pole is over there. Where's the chariot? And the answer to that is I can look at all of that stuff around there. I can see the parts of the chariot, and I put those parts together in my mind. And
It's
now
a
that chariot
concept.
exists in the mind. It's a concept. It exists as a concept. So, in that regard, actual physical human beings with physical bodies, physical emotions, physical minds, physical thought processes that manifest themselves physically, all of that does exist, but that the person who they think they are does not exist, especially when they think they are the same person. For instance, like many people have a lot of trouble remembering what they did when they were very, very young. Very few people will remember, for instance, what they'd had on their fifth birthday present. What kind of cake did you have at your fifth birthday? Did you have a party? How many people were at your party on your fifth birthday? Do you remember your fourth birthday party? Do you remember what present you got for your fourth birthday? Okay. When we can remember that kind of stuff, then we think of it as my birthday. And yet there is absolutely nothing left except a tiny few bits and pieces of memory. And that's all that's left. The me that existed at that fourth birthday, that doesn't exist anymore. And I am nothing like that person at the age of 4. I still don't have the presents that I received. I don't have those gifts anymore. Not only that, but I don't wear the clothes that I wore when I was 4. Not only that, but I don't have the thoughts that I had when I was 4. Not only that, but I don't have the skin that I had when I was 4, or the stature, or anything. 100% everything has changed since the time that I was 4. Not one thing exists now that existed then, and nothing that existed then exists now, except for my memory of it, which is nothing but a concept. And then I can think of an example would be the movie Avatar. I can have thoughts of seeing the movie Avatar, but the real planet and the real avatars are no more in existence than remembering when I was 4 years old. that all of that doesn't
Yep.
exist anymore. It's gone. And so the delusion is that I am what I was when I was 4. I am 5. I am 10. I am 15. And no, that's not true. In fact, you're not even who you were last year. You don't remember what you
Well,
did on your birthday last year.
yes, a couple of comments on that. So one is, the neuroscience shows that when you're remembering a memory, you're not actually remembering the moment, you're remembering the last time you remembered it. So it's a
That's even
game of
worse, isn't
telephone.
it?
Yeah, it's a game of telephone.
Hmm.
And, Freud picked up on that when he was talking about dreams, and he believed that your memory of the dream was part of the dream itself. So how you remember
I
the
would go
dream,
so far as to say your memory of the dream is now the dream, and the dream that you had at night,
yes,
you don't remember that. That's gone. That all we have of that dream is what we remember of it now.
right, which is why it was useful in therapy in part because you're revealing how you feel now by how you're recalling that dream,
Hmm.
however accurate it was or wasn't. But
Isn't that interesting? Everything happens right now. And the past can be completely dispensed with. It's forgotten. It doesn't exist anymore. But when we identify with ourselves in the past, that's delusional. Thinking that
so
I am in the past and I am in the future, to where everything is in the state of flux. But
so question,
what
but
is
yeah.
in flux
Yep.
does exist. But the continuity of that flux does not. In this moment, there is a Robert, but that Robert right now is not the same Robert that I said last time when I said, "This is Robert." You've changed. Why?
Sure,
Because before you were doing this and now you're doing this. Something's changed. It's not the same Robert.
sure. So comment on that. So, one thing I've noticed in my practice, particularly today, but I've also noticed it in the past, a few days ago, is when is sometimes when sometimes I'll have an insight, of, oh, when this happened 10 minutes ago, it was this thing led to this thing, which led to this thing. And that's why I felt that way I did, or that's why this happened. As I had a perception. Let's say I found myself, here's a kind of a nice, pleasant version of that today. I was just thinking about. I was walking my dog, and I was looking at my dog, thinking about how I loved my dog. You know, and then I thought, huh, I wonder where that came from. And then I realized, well, I saw another dog in the distance, and that caused me to look at my dog, and then that caused that thought to arise that I love my dog.
This, what you're talking about now, is very, very useful. You're beginning now, and you use the word insight. Now, that's okay. Insight into the nature of cause and effect. That this thought causes that thought causes this feeling causes this behavior, and everything is set up in that sequence of cause, effect, cause, effect. And if we're wise to it, we can interrupt or make modifications in that cause effect so that it does not wind up in dukkha. An example of that is the guy sees the dog at a distance. He looks at the lousy mutt that he's got here, and he feels bad because he wants that fancy dog out there, and all he's got is this stupid dog that he's got here. All right, you could hear all the dukkha that he's created in his mind because now he's comparing the two dogs. But if you can say, "Oh, that's a nice dog," and "Oh, this is a nice dog," then there's no dukkha there.
Right, right. And and it's funny too. There was a portion of one of your talks where you were talking about training a horse and how the good horse trainer would give them an apple and get to know them, be nice to them, etc. And it made me
Mm-hmm.
happy listening to that because that has been my approach to my dog is I'm very nice to him all the time and he's very happy. People will even tell me, your dog seems like such a happy dog, you know. My neighbor told me that today. Like, oh, your dog seems really happy. And it's like, well, that's because I'm nice to him all the time,
Hmm.
all the time, every day. I'm just
Guess
nice
what?
and
If you be
reassuring.
nice to yourself, you'll be a good dog too. You'll-
Yeah, well, well, it's funny because I had another realization that I'm similar with my mom. Because my mom, she has bipolar disorder, so my one of my ways of dealing with that has been being very nice and reassuring to her all the time,
Mhm.
because she would get wrapped up in whatever she would get wrapped up in, like, oh, this person at work said this, or this happened, that happened, and her emotions could just totally go wherever they're going to go. And my approach with my mom has always been, it's okay, mom, it's all going to be fine.
Mhm.
It's, don't worry about it. If you're worried about your job, there's plenty of other jobs out there. Worried about this person, no
Or
need to
right
worry
now, at
about
this
that.
particular moment, right now, at this particular moment, you can
Yeah,
tell her that the person that you're telling me about is not here.
sure.
They're not here. That person that you're talking about right now was at work before, but right here, right now, they're not here. And
Right,
when she
that's
says,
even
"Yeah,
better. Yeah,
yeah, she's not here. Why should we be talking about her? She's not here. Not part of the
right,
reality. It's part of
right.
the
That,
past."
yes, yes, that's better. That's better. I'll say that next time. But but it's been nice being able to help my mom in this way. That's been a very nice part of my
How
life.
bodhisattva of you.
Yeah,
When we start treating
yeah,
ourselves well, then we start treating the dog well. And when we start treating the dog well and ourselves well, we start treating other people well also. This is the distinction then between the Arhat and the Bodhisattva, is that the Arhat is completely successful in getting his own mind straightened out, and then he's very successful at dealing with others one at a time in this present moment, one by one as they occur, to where the bodhisattva is stuck in failure because he hasn't gotten everybody saved. He doesn't even know how to save everybody. He doesn't even know how
right,
to cheer up anybody because he's not been cheered up yet, because he's waiting for all the other people to get cheered up before he can cheer up.
right. Well,
This is and so this is how people see the bodhisattva ideal. The original idea of it was nice, but it was grandiose.
sure.
But within the Theravada, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa did talk about this, but the main teacher on this particular point, like so much of the other, was Achan Po. Achan Po was very, very clear and very specific and very adamant about that. What Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talked about was duty to the Dhamma, that
Mhm.
we have a duty to the Dhamma in the sense of the Buddha Dhamma, or we can think of it as Dhamma is reality. You have responsibilities to the reality that you live in. For instance, if the body is going to stay alive, you have the responsibility to breathe. And guess what? When we do then breathe, we get the benefit of that breath because we are doing our duty of the Dhamma and getting the benefit of doing our duty to the Dhamma right then and there. So, if the greater understanding of the Buddha Dhamma, or the greater understanding of Dhamma in general, is that it is better to be joyful than it is to be miserable, then let us gain joy and then spread it as we may. This is our duty to the Dhamma. When we recognize that our duty to the Dharma is just living, and when we don't live correctly, we suffer. That dukkha is actually the result of not living according to reality, not according to the Dhamma. But when we do live according to the Dhamma, then we gain great benefit from that. And so when we recognize there is a duty, and my duty is to not only to live the Dhamma, but to spread it. And by doing that, I get great joy. I really enjoy our conversations because I'm
Thank you. Me
actually out
too.
there spreading the Dhamma. That's the whole idea of spreading the Dhamma, is because we gain great benefit, we gain great joy. That in fact, there is a sutta where the Buddha, I'm not going to go into any detail on that sutta other than to say that talking of the Dhamma and spreading the Dhamma is sufficient, all the conditionality that's needed for one to go into jhana.
Hmm.
Why? Because the Dhamma is wholesome.
Hmm.
The Dhamma is joyful. If we start having joy and we are really paying attention to the Dhamma, that means that we're applying our mind to the Dhamma and sustaining the Dhamma. We're gaining great joy out of listening to the Dhamma right now, and the person has all the constituent components of jhana, just by listening to the Dhamma or teaching the Dhamma, the Dhamma. By teaching the Dhamma,
What's the
one
difference?
can go right into jhana. Well, in fact, they can meet together, right? Okay, so back to that point then, once we have the Dhamma, our duty then is to live that Dhamma, and by living the Dhamma, we spread it. You cannot live the Dhamma without spreading it to others. It's like if you smile at somebody, that's like giving them a fish.
Yes, and a comment
And
on
so,
that.
if you go even further
Yeah.
than that and give the gift to the Dhamma in the sense of teaching the Dhamma, then not only are you teaching the person how to find his own smiles anytime he wants to, but now he has the skills to go and teach other people how to smile. And he
Right.
can teach them how to smile. And so for 2,500 years, we've been spreading the Dhamma just like this, one person at a time, one on one. It's always been spread like that. That the very best of the Dhamma is always done in a transmission, one on one. That's been in the Theravada, in the Tibetan, in the Japanese. It always has to do with one's relationship to their teacher, because that
Sure.
it's wholesome. And that's actually then the whole point of uh, the duty to the Dhamma, is by sharing the Dhamma. And because of that, it has a positive feedback loop and it grows. So we're talking about a seed that grows and grows and grows into the organization that exists now of the order of Buddhist monks worldwide, right? But the Bodhisattva ideal starts big in the first place. You got to go save everybody,
Sure.
all beings. Go get them all. And when you get them all happy, then you can be happy too. Well, how are you going to teach somebody to be happy? That's almost laying only after the entire world is completely on fire and burning down. Can you get any fire? Well, how am I going to start the world on fire to get it to burn down before, so that by the time the whole world is burning down, I can get a little bit of fire? How can I get the world on fire if I don't have any in the beginning? So it's got a catch 22 built into it.
Sure.
It's got a catch 22 built into it when it's looked like may all beings be happy, or the metta or the bodhisattva ideal is set up for failure. It's
I
too
think, yeah.
grandiose.
Yes, I think this touches on something that's really important. And, and I think that, I don't know if the Bodhisattvas would actually feel this, except perhaps in the Western context, I'm sure they would. But in the West, guilt is a very large part of our society, is this notion of guilt.
Hmm.
I don't know if it is to the same degree in Asia. I know the Dalai Lama once said that he was meeting with people, I think this was in the 80s or the 90s. He was meeting with some people from the West, and someone asked him a question about self-hatred, and he had never heard that word before. It didn't translate
Self
into
what?
anything in Tibetan. Self-hatred.
Self-hatred. Uh-huh.
There's no translation in Tibetan. He didn't understand it, and he had to repeatedly ask questions to understand what this meant, because he didn't even have a concept for it himself.
Okay.
And I think that's tied into guilt, and I think this notion of having to save everyone, which is a very Christian idea, although the Bodhisattva path is not Christian, but it parallels that, even though it's very old. It's probably older than Christianity, or maybe
You're
the same
touching
age.
on a very important point. You're touching on something. First off, let us say that the whole concept of original sin is there. In other words, you are, according to Christianity, you are screwed up. You were screwed up from the very beginning. You were
Right.
screwed up because of your ancestry screwed up. And because your ancestry, and in a way, they're right. The judgments that Adam and Eve did way back when, though they didn't have the names of Adam and Eve, but they started the critical thinking, the judgments and whatnot like that. So you could say then that really what the Western mind has that's built on guilt is based upon really critical thinking, with the idea that this is good and this is bad and you're bad and this is good, and that you can't do anything about it. You screwed up. And so we have this concept of punishment and guilt. Now, in the Mediterranean culture, it's completely different than that. They have what is called an honor system. And the worst aspects of it is when if the daughter literally screws up, then the family will kill her rather than having to deal with the shame of the daughter screwing up, right? Not guilt. The father in our culture will feel guilty because his daughter screwed up. In Timbuktu, literally, or in Tunisia, or in Egypt, if the daughter screws up, the father will try to maintain his honor rather than feeling guilty.
Yeah, it's funny. Nietzsche writes about that genealogy of morals, how the noble society. He's a very different meaning of noble than how you describe noble, or Buddhism describes it. His meaning's very different. But anyway, what he calls noble, I'll say, they had punishment, but they didn't have guilt, and
Hmm.
and then it was Christianity that created guilt. But before guilt,
It
there was
appears that.
just punishment. There was just punishment. It wasn't a
Mhm.
moral judgment with it. It was just punishment.
Okay. I would go
Yeah.
so far as to say that much of the culture of Thailand is also honor based, and that they talk about face. Okay. Chinese talk about face in the sense of losing face,
Right.
and that's an honor code. But in the more Asian part of it, they also have the quality of rehabilitation, not forgiveness, but rehabilitation.
Hmm.
You see, in the West, the rehabilitation is only possible if there is guilt. In other words, you have to feel guilty, you have to remorse, you have to confess, and it's built right
Right.
into our legal system. If someone confesses to a crime, then the prosecutor has less work to do, the defense lawyer has less to do, the judge has less to do, and they'll say, okay, we'll cut him a break if he confesses. We'll give him a reduced sentence. That's the guilt. Okay. In the honor culture, you screwed up, we don't care whether you admit it or not, off with your head, whack.
Yep.
Okay, that's the
Yeah.
difference. But in Asia, uh you screwed up, we know you screwed up, get over it.
Yeah. It's funny. And Nietzsche, the way he puts it, is he said the noble cultures, there was good and bad in the slave mentality, which is what he refers to Christianity as slave morality. He refers to the pre-Christian times as master morality, and he says the slave morality. So the master morality believes in good and bad. The slave morality believes in good and evil,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very important distinction. In the evil has a lot, the good and the evil has a lot of moral judgmentalness in it. You
Yes,
know.
but you can
Yep.
see, in fact, that judgment or that criticism, and the outcome of that is the bad feelings of guilt. And
Yes.
this is what
Yes.
I
And he
see
writes
so
extensively
strongly in the Western
about this.
society. It
Yep.
is a guilt-ridden society,
It is, and even
and
if you're
people
not
even feel
Christian,
guilty for not
yep.
feeling guilty.
Yep, yep. And I realize as well that I would feel guilty about having an off day. Like, oh, why didn't I do anything today?
Hmm.
What's wrong with me? Why am I
How
like
dare you
this?
be lazy, right? Even
How
though you
dare I
don't.
be lazy? Yeah. Yeah, how dare I play video games, How dare I not apply for jobs? This and that, um and it's very um it's a boondoggle, it's not just that. It's like a fog, it's like a fog that just kind of screws up your whole day. Just going
Exactly so.
around feeling
Uh-huh.
guilty. And you can
Well,
feel
they talk
guilty
about the
about things.
the fog of war, because
Yeah.
there's so much happening that people can't keep track of, and so everything winds up being a fog. Not only that, but everybody's got their own viewpoint about what really happened. So this group of enemies have this idea, this group of enemies have that idea, this group of enemies has their own idea. You see, and it all
Yep.
put together as a fog. Guess what? Inside each one of us, there's also a crowd. And so this part of us will say this part will say that, this will answer this over here, and the next thing you know, the mind is confused because it's in a fog. We don't know which way to go because we've got all this conflicting information. This is where, in fact, Freud and Eric Berne really began to put things together, that, in fact, the crowd that we're in winds up being the parent, the child, and the adult, in the sense that all of the authority stuff that is the basis of the Western society is different, by the way, than the honor system. The honor system means that I'm an honorable man in this honorable town, and if my unhonorable daughter shows herself to be unhonorable, I have got to get my honor back so that I can maintain my status in the community. Okay. Guilt is not like that, because guilt always has to do with an authority figure, a mom, a priest, a rabbi, a policeman, a god, but it always, and a boss, especially the boss. That our relationship to the authority is the predominant way that we interact in the West, where in the Mediterranean culture is all about honor. In other words, is my family status and my behavior up to scratch in our society? To where in the West it has to do with, is my honor or is my behavior up to the scratch of some ideal uh, authority figure? And then we'll take that ideal authority figure and put it onto the boss, put it onto mom, put it onto the government, put it onto God, put it onto someone like that. But it's still an abstract idea that there is some authority over me. I'm still a child. In other words, Western society is set up so that no one ever grows up. We maintain our child position of being under the thumb of some authority, some a society. And in the West, we break that down basically into four groups that I call the GREB: government, religion, education, and business. Those are the big dudes that we have as authority figures, our bosses in the business. our teachers and the education, our religious leaders, and our police and politicians and whatnot in business. And we always see ourselves as subservient to those people, as opposed to uh, a wise man will just see them all as just ordinary people going about doing ordinary things. And so we treat them like ordinary human beings. So when you see a cop in uniform, he's not a cop in uniform. He's a man who is delusional enough to think he's a cop. And you'd better go along with his delusion.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the right way of looking at it. So it's neither an honor when one is noble, he is not either not trying to maintain his honor, nor is he trying to grovel in front of an authority figure. That he's his
So,
own man and he doesn't compare himself to other people. If he compares himself to other people, he's bound to find something to feel bad about. And so he doesn't compare himself to others.
sure. So that's really interesting. So one other topic I wanted to discuss with you today is related to this, which is right attitude.
Okay.
Because I've found your injunction to be like a lion, have the attitude of a lion. It's like a little mantra that I have now, and I reflect on that sometimes, and I enjoy thinking about that. And say, when I think about sitting to practice, I'll think, well, you can do it. You got this. Just go sit, go
Mm-hmm.
do it, And now I don't always follow through on that, with various things. So, for example, today I wanted to go for a run. I'd say, you can do it. You got this. And then I would just end up not doing it.
Okay.
So, but, so perhaps that right attitude was not, it was stable enough to get me to meditate, but it wasn't quite enough to push me to go on my run that I wanted to go on. So I'm
Okay.
curious to hear
Excellent.
what your
So
thoughts
you're
on that.
seeing that.
Yeah,
Well, my thoughts are that
yeah,
that's exactly what's going on. Yes. So we could also go to say that right attitude in for the Westerner has to do with coming out of the guilt of being the victim.
yes, yes,
Okay. That the winner doesn't feel guilty. So what happened was is that you feel I can do this, and you went to meditate, and then you say I can go for the run, and then you didn't go for the run, and now you feel guilty because you said you'd go for the run and you didn't go for the run. So there's the guilt. If you'd have
right,
said, well, I did want to go on a run, but now I decided I'm not going to go on a run, and you could have kept that lion's attitude.
hmm,
Because the lion's attitude has nothing to do whether you go for a run or not. It has to do with your attitude.
sure,
and you had the right attitude, and then when you didn't go for a run, now you became a victim or you felt guilty again. Your attitude went. You don't have
right,
to let your don't let so become aware of that. Recognize when you change your attitude.
sure,
Recognize that. Maintain that lion's attitude. Hey, I got this, even if I don't want to do it. Then I have the lion's attitude. I don't want to do it, and I don't do it because I don't want to, even if it's good
sure.
for me. Even if I said 10 minutes ago I'm going to do it because it's good for me, now I say I don't want to do it, and I'm still a lion.
I'm still going to stand by that.
Right. So it all depends
Yeah,
upon what's happening in this present moment. Lying now, lying the next moment, no guilt now. Even if I didn't do it, I'm still the lion.
sure, sure. That's
Okay.
very helpful.
That's the can-do attitude has nothing to do with whether you actually do it or not. It's still all about attitude.
Hmm. So now let's say you do something that not only are you not doing something good, but you're doing something bad. So let's say a minor example might be like what I did the other yesterday, which is I had some bad pizza. I had like this very unhealthy pepperoni pizza, cheese pizza. That's not really that bad. Let's say if I like broke into someone's house and stole, like their money or something like that, you know, what would the right attitude approach be? Would it be, okay, this wasn't good, I'm gonna go put it back and apologize? What would the right, how would the right attitude deal with kind of like a more morally worse situation?
Um,
And the bad pizza is like only a little bit negative, but the breaking into someone's house is very negative. So, yeah, how would you deal with these various different situations?
well,
Or, sorry, one last point.
I don't know about the pizza. Let me give you a
Yeah,
completely different example because this is something that's happening right now.
sure.
Okay, I bought some hard drives on eBay for a while. Then I bought hard drives on Lazada, and it took a while to find out that these, in fact, are fake drives. And the way that I found it out is by getting in touch with the manufacturers and have them look up the serial numbers on these drives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before I had found out that they were bad, and I knew that Lazada wasn't going to take them as returns, I put one of the drives on eBay. It was sold, made a huge profit. I sent it to them. Today I get the no, wait a minute. Then what happened was once I recognized that the drives were bad, I took the drive off of eBay, and someone who had been bidding on it uh, sent an email saying, "Why? What happened? Did you sell it or something?" And I said, "No, I took it off of eBay because I recognized later that it was in fact a fake, a fraud. It was not part of their database, and because of that." I took it down, and so the guy then sent an email back saying, "Wow, an honest man. Those are rare, unfortunately, but I'm glad to see at least one of them." Okay. So this would be the thing then that if you took something from someone's house, it depends upon whether they know that it was taken or not.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't know that it was taken, then the right thing to do would be just to put it back.
Sure.
But if they know that it was taken, now we have the obligation to present it and give it back to them and deal
Sure.
with it that way. But you can deal with it friendly. Hey, I borrowed your shovel and I'm coming back to give it back to you. I hope I didn't cause you any consternation when you realize your shovel was gone.
Sure. Sure. So,
Okay.
like, and
Now
here's an example. Yeah.
that is not how to say it uh, mollifying or making right or fixing in any way the fact that we did wrong in the first place,
Right.
right? That we actually did screw up. And so we need to apologize for that. But there's no reason to either hide it or to feel guilty or anything like that. That once we wake up to recognize that we have done something wrong, then we want to set it right. Even if I did something what we would call consciously wrong, that consciousness was still screwed up. It was not really woke, if you use that word, okay? That we were ignorantly stupid when our desires were so great that I took something out of someone's house. But now that I recognize that I have done someone harm, I need to make amends. But that doesn't mean that I have to feel bad. That I can
Sure.
apologize and return the object or add some addition to it, but doing it in a friendly way.
Sure. So a couple comments. One is, the person not knowing it was missing, it's actually better for them to never know that it was stolen because it's more peace of mind, right?
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
So the most uh, unduca thing that you can do is merely return it before they know that it was missing. Therefore, it's like it didn't happen.
Sure. So
But they do know that it's missing, they will become suspicious of all kinds of things. And the best thing for you to do is when you return it is to do it in a really friendly way
sure. Now
rather than
let's
feeling
say
guilty. If you feel guilty, that will invite them to take on the authoritarian position. Oh, you screwed up. And now I've got to punish you, even if he doesn't want to punish you. We set that top dog, underdog position up if we feel bad. But if we feel good in returning it, now we're automatically back on an equal level of friendship.
sure. So here's an actual example from my life. So I was unfaithful to an ex-girlfriend, and I never told her about it. She never knew. We broke up, but I still felt bad about it, even though she never knew. But I opted never to tell her because I thought it would hurt her feelings too much if she found out.
Almost as
Um,
bad as it hurt you.
yeah, yeah, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings like that. I just
Okay.
thought,
Now, here's the thing. Suppose you screwed up like that and
yeah,
she didn't know it and you didn't either.
then it would have all been okay.
Then it would have been all okay. In fact, the only problem with you doing that and screwing up was that you knew it and you knew that it was a screw up.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
and she never knew. She never found. But I just didn't, and I didn't want to hurt her. So she was spared from that, but I was not,
Hmm.
and I still feel guilty about it. Um, and I guess I can just let that. I mean, it doesn't help me to feel guilty. It's
No,
pointless.
so you can make the point that, oh, I
Yeah,
see the guilt in that. I see, and so now my position is that I'm not going to do that. It's not quite
yeah,
a vow. You wouldn't go so far as to say, because vows are often done out of self-hatred.
sure.
In other words, you hated yourself so much for screwing up like that that you vow, I will never do that again.
I'll
And
try
then you
not to do
do.
it. Yeah,
And then you do. Okay. But it's much better to see that, wait a minute, I did that. I felt guilty about it. Let me take that into consideration the next time I'm about to pull my pants down. I can recognize that, hey, this is dangerous. This is really dangerous.
well, yeah.
Okay.
Then you can say, "There's the dukkha,"
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want more dukkha, so I'm not going to do this again. you know,
Exactly.
um, and it's
That's
kind of
why I
just back
generally
to
make the distinction between dangerous and dukkha and call dangerous dangerous is because it may not be dukkha, but it is dangerous because it can, because you're in the vicinity of dukkha.
right.
Okay. So this is why I call, once we can see the dangers in things, then we can find the escape from it. But as always in this present moment, to where the bodhisattva vow or a vow of silence or a vow of chastity or a vow I'll never do that ever again, that sets one up for failure.
Hmm.
And the
And
and the
here's a point. I
and the
just had an insight.
bodhisattva is
Yeah.
guaranteed failure.
Well, it also presumes that you exist.
Yes, it does. Into the
Yes.
future.
Yes, because you're saying that there's some core me that will continue to fulfill this vow. And
Yes.
and that
You're right. I
is
hadn't thought about
incorrect.
that. That's an excellent point. Yes. The
Thank you.
vow assumes a self.
And it also assumes that, and I think that's part of the difference between guilt versus, say, honor, right? Or guilt versus good, bad versus good, evil, to use the Nietzschean idea, right? That's one of the
Mhm.
differences, is in the good, bad, um, or in the good, evil, I should say, in the good, evil, you are positing that there's a person there with a soul. There's some permanent entity that is now evil forever or tainted forever.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas if it's just good, bad, there's none of that soul business. It's like this action was good, this one not as good. skillful, unskillful,
I
right?
see what you're talking about. So good and bad has more to do with this present moment, where good and evil is a pronouncement for a long period of time.
Yes, because it
That,
posits a soul in an
one,
afterlife
right.
and
Once
and
there's
a
something
God.
is evil, it's always evil.
Yes, unless perhaps if it repents to Christ, right, and does so meaning in a meaningful way,
Hmm.
that's the
Right.
salvation, right? But
To where, for instance, if the automobile mechanic sent his apprentice to go get a part out of the parts room, and the student brings back the part for a different car, then that part is bad. It's the wrong part. But the part itself is not evil because that part will go on another car next time.
right,
Okay, so it's only bad in this particular moment, to where the idea of good and evil has to do then with evil being permanently evil or long lasting evil. I see what you're talking about. That I can understand. Um, but another way of looking at it is both good and bad or good and evil is still judgmental.
it is, yes.
And it
One
and
is
it
much more so than the other, but it still
Mhm.
is. Yeah.
Right. Well, um, in that regard, we could say that the sequence of events could be like this: that the feelings of liking and not liking, the feeling of liking ignorantly becomes wanting, ignorant more, and then it's good in the sense of good and bad, and then ultimately that will go into good and evil. So if I like it, I want it, it must be good, therefore it must always be good. And I don't like it, therefore I want to get rid of it, therefore it is bad, and therefore it is bad for all time, and therefore evil. So that was one delusion after another delusion after another delusion to get down to the level of evil, to where uh, good and bad were only three levels of ignorance as opposed to four.
Huh.
Okay, I like it. Ignorant number one. If I'm wise to that, then I can deal with my feeling. But if I don't, then the ignorance will take it to the second, which is I want it. If I want it, ignorance again is I like it, and if I like it, I it's good, and then the next one is good for all time. And so these are various levels of ignorance. But if we can back up, we can recognize, oh, just I like it, therefore I want it, and that's judgments. I want it, I don't want it. If we can bring it back to the level of liking and leave it at that, then I can change my feelings. In other words, just because I like it doesn't mean that I want it. I can just leave it at liking. Or if I don't like something, I can just leave it at I don't like it, but I don't have to do anything about it. And that's
Huh.
wise. Or a better thing would be is being wise to the not liking, I can change it into liking. Here's an example of that. The child is having a tantrum. Mom does not like the child having a tantrum. So what does mom do when she doesn't like the child having a tantrum? She has one of her own. If you don't shut up, I'm going to slap you. Okay, and so here goes the tantrums, right? But if the mom is wise at that point of contact when the child starts to tantrum, then mom can change the way she feels from I don't like the child having a tantrum into having compassion for the child. Oh, poor child, what's your problem? And now we can go into nurturing, because that
Huh.
would be a wise way of handling I don't like the child in tantrum. I can become joyful instead. So we can actually change the way that we feel if we are wise to it. But if
Huh.
we are just one layer of ignorance after another layer of ignorance after another layer of ignorance, we wind up having things that are evil and bad for all time.
Sure. So, a couple of comments. One is a lot of this reminds me of, what Aristotle said the key to the good life is learning to love your virtues and hate your vices. If you can figure that out, how to do that, you're going to have a good life, and that that presumes that you can understand what virtue is. And
I
to
would go
understand
so
that,
far as to changing that in the sense of develop the skill to increase the virtues and to develop the skills to abandon the vices
right, which might be, I
without
don't know what
ever
he,
have without
I
ever
was
having to hate them.
paraphrasing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
okay.
paraphrasing. I don't know the exact quote, but I was paraphrasing. So hate is maybe too strong, love may be too strong, but he
Well,
basically said
hate's got a really
negative
definitely
energy.
bad quality. I got to
Yeah.
say it this way: hate. I hate hate.
I
Hate.
think
I
hate's
hate
okay.
you.
Hate's
Hate hate.
hate's fine.
Yeah,
It's all
well, hate's
good.
okay.
It's
Right, it's
all
all good.
good.
Right. Yeah. I don't have to hate the virtues or the vices. I can just come out
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget what the actual quote was, but it's like cultivate your virtues, diminish your vices, whatever it may be, which is a
That
lot
we
of
can,
what this is.
exactly, and we
Yeah.
can do that with good feelings. We don't have to hate. We don't have
Sure.
to hate our vices. We can just see that they're dangerous and to be
Sure.
avoided.
Sure. We can understand them.
Understand them, just like you understand when you're having an off day.
Sure.
You just
So,
understand that, and you accept it in the sense
so
of nurturing. You don't have to become critical of your off day.
sure. So a couple of questions. So, one is, um, um, if you are nurturing yourself on an off day, do you think that will generally lead to it not being an off day, generally speaking? Like, do you think that's often the outcome of doing so?
Yeah, yeah. But by the way, calling it an off day is just being negative, just hating it, rather than just seeing it like it is. That if you see it like it is, then it's,
You
you
just say, I'm
know,
feeling tired and lazy today, and that's
yeah,
okay.
I'm tired and lazy today. Yeah, take the day off.
Sure. So,
Yeah, take the day
now,
off.
the other
Or maybe I
question,
can say I can take the day off, and then 4 hours later I feel energetic, and so then I can say, well, I'll go do it now.
sure, sure. So, my other question was, so this is regarding changing your attention. So, when I was sitting today and I was focusing on the mind moments, um, I would notice that they would go all over the place completely. It would be, partly on the breath and then like maybe my cheek and then maybe like some visual thing that I see, like a light or something, and then, and then a thought of what is even all of this, and then this and that, kind of going all
Okay.
over the place. And then being aware of that, I would eventually just return to what you asked me to focus on, which is the moments between the thoughts, which is just kind of this show of things happening. And you mentioned in a video that I was listening to today, just enjoy the show. So I've been taking that. I'm going to take that to heart tomorrow. I listened to that video after all my sitting today, so tomorrow I'll take that one to heart. But uh, the other thing was arising and passing, which I guess is what some of this is, right? Um,
Hmm.
so, um, but what's interesting about that is the attention can go from being all over the place to being directed onto something, such as the breath, right? But
Yes.
if I don't exist, then what is it that is directing that attention?
The attention.
The attention is directing the attention.
Hmm.
The attention is just directing itself.
The intention is directing the attention.
Ah, so this actually provides a lot of insight with respect to why it's so important to cultivate the first jhana, because
Hmm.
that purifies your intention.
Yes, exactly so.
Hmm.
In this regard, the intention that we're using is the translation of the word sankappa, which it actually is the word for attitude.
Hmm.
So you could say that your intention or your attitude is directing it, because now that's what's happening. But there's still no permanent self in there. It's just a process, the human process.
Hmm.
And
So
that
what are
process is changing. The way that you processed last year is not the way that you're processing now. Now you've got new information, new insights, new ways of looking at things, and so your intention has changed, or your attitude has changed. If there was a permanent self in there, then you wouldn't change your attitude. You would be
sure?
still, in fact, you could say that when the self is because it is subject to karma.
Hmm.
And the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about karma and karma vipaka, of the habit patterns of the mind, are on and on. That gives predestination, it gives destiny, it gives providence, and it gives us a future oriented way of looking at things, because it's consistent. It's consistent because it's a habit pattern. It's the samsara. It rolls on and on and on and on and on until you wake up and decide you have some choices here. You don't have to let it go on automatic pilot doing the same things it used to do. Because of that, you're adding new information to the mix. You're adding to the intention, and things begin to change, and there's no self there. This is the whole quality of that you have choices in there, and that the whole idea of a self or a soul is that it doesn't have any choice. Okay, that the original sin is that you're a sinner. Here's Christianity for you. Christianity teaches that there is original sin. All have are lost and strayed away from God. Each one in his own direction. That who were you to be good? Only God is good, and that you trying to be good is always going to fail because of the original sin. Therefore, you can't get out of it on your own. You need help. And we have this magic plastic Jesus on the dashboard here. And all you have to do is to suck up to this plastic Jesus on the dashboard, and thou shalt have eternal life. That's the stick. Only this plastic magic Jesus is expensive. He comes with a plate. Okay. And so this is the religion of Christianity. In a way, you could say that Christianity only works because of their magical story. To where the within Buddhism, we have a lot of magical stories about the Buddha, but we don't need any of those magical stories in order to get the value out of the teaching of the Buddha. In a way, you could go so far as to say that no one needs any of the magic of the Christian story, and still, if they did, according to what Jesus said, they would take great benefit, right? But it's the magic story that winds up being the predominant issue, and the magic story is that you can't fix yourself. You need our whoop-de-doo plastic magic Jesus.
Right.
And in Buddhism, we have it exactly opposite of that. You don't need no magic plastic Jesus. You need to change what's on the inside. So one has a soul, and that soul is not capable of repairing itself. It was broken from the very beginning, original sin.
Right.
It cannot be good. Only God is good, they say. Isn't that interesting now? Okay, so if we in fact don't have that self, if we don't have that broken soul, that means that we are not subject to the laws of that soul. We are not bound by the cause and effect of our karma. That we are not, in fact, originally broken from original sin, because that whole concept doesn't exist. There is no self there. Therefore, you as a human being can make choices and can change your personality. Your personality is not fixed. You are not your personality.
Yeah.
You are whatever your intentions are, and you can change your intentions by changing your attitude and changing your thoughts.
Sure. So, quick question on that, and it's getting quite late, and I heard, so yeah, it's 1 a.m. now. We've been going for almost 3 hours.
2.5 at least. Okay.
Yeah.
So one last question.
This has been great though. It's been great though, as always. Um, so this might lead to another question, but that's fine. I guess we'll just roll with it for a moment. But so regarding the intention that directs the attention. So
Mhm.
what caused the intention to arise was the things I was seeing, the rising and passing, right?
Mhm.
And then that caused the question of, what should I focus on to arise? And then it went to the breath, right? Or it went to just watch the whole show, just let it be,
Mhm.
or whatever was going on at that time. Um, so I guess part of my question is, I remember learning this in Wat Chom Tong all those years ago as well, that I believe the teacher said it goes perception leads to thought, which leads to word, which leads to action. Um,
No,
okay, so
no.
yeah, might be I misremembered it
Perception
too.
leads to thought, which leads to bad feelings, which leads to dukkha.
Oh, got it. Perception leads to thought, which leads to emotion, which leads to action, right? Is that it? Or perception
Yeah,
leads to
but the
emotion?
action is the action has nothing to do in the way that they think. Whoever said that is not looking at really what's going on. It does not necessarily lead to action.
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, it doesn't always lead to action, but like that's just the train if it does lead to action, is that.
It
But
can, but the action is often always in response to dukkha. If there's no dukkha, there's no action. So he's missing an important ingredient in there.
sure, yeah, yeah, I don't remember that one. I think, yeah, that was
Well,
incorrect, I guess. But so, well, you could have wholesome action too.
yes,
So
absolutely.
you could have a perception, like say I perceive my dog is hungry, and then I have the thought, or I perceive the thought of that, and then I have the thought, okay, I need to feed my dog, or maybe some emotion of desire to do that arises, and then I take the action to feed my dog, which is a wholesome action, right?
Okay. Okay.
But so, but you
But
mentioned
how
that
you
action,
feed the dog can be dukkha or not dukkha. You can feed the
yes,
dog and be angry and upset and pissed off at the dog, or you can feed the dog happily.
right,
Okay.
which is
So
like,
the action of
yeah,
feeding the dog still has to do with whether there's dukkha or not in it. We'll
sure.
talk about this at a later time. You're right, it's getting late and there's stuff to do, and I got another caller, and
All right, sure.
to go to
Well,
bed, and we can finish this off at a later time. Because that basically what you're talking about is you're getting into the depths of Paticca Samuppada, about actually how the mind works. And we'll talk about that later. If I can get you to be quiet and listen long enough, I can give it to you.
all right, sounds good. Well, speak
All
soon.
righty. Well, we'll see
Yeah.
you later.
Yep, thanks so much. All right, talk to you later.